Cold rain drifted across the east side of Spokane Valley at 6:17 in the morning, while Rowan Vance signed the lease agreement on the hood of his truck. The paper kept curling in the wind, damp at the corners, the ink bleeding slightly beneath his hand. Beyond the empty lot behind him, freight trains moved slowly through the rail yard in long metallic groans that rolled across the warehouses like distant thunder. The garage looked worse up close. Cracked cinderblock walls sagged beneath a warped metal roof stained nearly black from years of leaking snowmelt. Half the windows had been covered from the inside with plywood, and the faded sign above the bay door still carried the ghost of old lettering. Vel Utimo Tive and Machine, though several letters no longer lit at all. The representative from Valor Bridge Housing Initiative tucked his clipboard under one arm and glanced at the building with visible amusement. 24 months, he said. After that, the city tears this whole section down. Rowan folded the contract once. Then I've got 24 months. The man laughed softly through his nose. For what? Rowan looked at the garage a few seconds before answering. To build something. Rainwater dripped from the edge of Rowan's jacket onto the pavement. Beside him stood Mako, a retired German Shepherd military dog with rain darkening the fur along his back. The dog stayed perfectly still while the representative backed toward his SUV, suddenly less comfortable than he had been a moment earlier. At that moment, Rowan Vance believed he had rented nothing more than a dying garage beside a forgotten rail yard. He didn't know the building was still full of things nobody had managed to let go of. If you're listening tonight from somewhere out there beyond Spokane, let me know where. And if you still believe a life can be rebuilt from the kinds of places everybody else walks away from, stay with this story. The inside of the garage smelled like old transmission fluid, wet insulation, and rusted steel. A hydraulic lift leaned crooked several inches off level near the center bay while rainwater dripped steadily into a faded blue paint bucket beside the rear wall. Drip, drip. Rowan spent most of the first day opening windows that barely moved and dragging junked engine parts into piles near the back fence. He restored power to half the building before sunset using salvaged breaker switches bought for $12 from a scrapyard near Trent Avenue. By midnight, the office heater behind the garage finally rattled weakly to life. That counted as progress. The office itself was barely larger than a prison cell. One desk, one filing cabinet, one cracked microwave yellowed from age. Rowan unfolded a military cot beside the heater and stacked his clothes inside a plastic storage bin beneath the desk, while Mako circled twice across the concrete floor before settling near the door. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, the garage breathed again. By the third morning, Rowan had repaired enough wiring to operate the compressor line and one bay light over the main workbench. He spent hours beneath the hood of an old Chevy Silverado whose owner couldn't afford dealership labor anymore. The truck belonged to a drywall installer from Deer Park who paid partly in cash and partly in coffee from a gas station off Highway 2. Rowan accepted both. People around the industrial district noticed him quickly after that. The former Navy SEAL, living inside a condemned garage, became an easy story for bored contractors and warehouse crews killing time between deliveries. Some mornings, men smoking outside the plumbing supply building across the street watched Rowan patch sections of roof metal while shaking their heads. Guys rebuilding a graveyard, one of them muttered. Another laughed. Heard he sleeps in there too. Rowan kept working. Mako didn't move at all, but the dog's ears shifted toward their voices. Sometimes that alone was enough to end conversations. Rain rolled through Spokane almost every evening that week. The cold settled into the concrete after dark and stayed there until morning. Freight trains thundered through the rail yard behind the garage sometime after 2 every night, shaking tools against pegboards hard enough to sound like distant gunfire. The first time it happened, Rowan woke already sitting upright on the cot, breathing hard. For several seconds, the office disappeared and Syria came back instead. Burnt diesel fuel, dirt storms, radio static, screaming metal. His right hand searched automatically beside the bed before finding nothing there except cold blankets and darkness. Mako crossed the room immediately. The dog pressed against Rowan's knee without making a sound. Rowan lowered his head slowly and rested one hand against the side of Mako's neck until the shaking in his breathing passed. The heater clicked softly nearby while rainwater slid down the office windows in thin silver lines. Neither of them slept much afterward. Friday evening arrived colder than the rest. Wind pushed freezing rain sideways through the industrial district, while Rowan fought with the main bay door around closing time. One of the rollers had warped from rust years ago, forcing him to shove his shoulder against the metal hard enough to make old bolts groan inside the track. That was when headlights swept across the lot. An older silver sedan turned slowly into the driveway and stopped beside the curb near the garage entrance. The engine ticked unevenly before shutting off completely. A woman stepped out holding a worn leather folder beneath one arm and a plastic laundromat bag in the other. Early 30s, tired eyes. Dark blonde hair tied back carelessly beneath the hood of a gray coat already soaked from rain. She stood there looking at the garage for several quiet seconds. Not confused, not curious, like someone seeing a place she already knew. "Sorry," Rowan said first, wiping his hands on the edge of an old shop rag. "We're closing up for the night." Rowan noticed the hesitation underneath it anyway. "You closing?" she asked. Trying to. Her eyes drifted across the garage, the repaired wiring near the office door, the open toolbox beside the bay, the fresh sheet metal bolted across part of the leaking roof like someone stubbornly refusing to let the place die. Then she looked back at him. "You hiring?" Rowan gave a quiet breath through his nose. "No, can barely keep this place running as it is." She nodded once, like she had expected the answer before she asked. "Yeah," she said softly. "That sounds about right." Wind rattled loose metal somewhere behind the building. Far off near the rail yard, a train horn rolled low through the dark. Eden adjusted the folder against her chest and glanced once toward the highway. "Still think you should," she said, "even if it's just temporary." Mako lifted his head from the garage floor. The German Shepherd watched her quietly beneath the flickering bay light, but he never growled. Rain hissed across the pavement outside while freight trains moved somewhere beyond the warehouses. The woman adjusted the folder against her chest and finally nodded once. "All right," she said softly. "I figured I'd ask." She turned toward the parking lot. Rowan watched her reach the old silver sedan before looking back toward Mako. The dog was still staring after her. Eden came back the next morning at 7:12, with 2 paper cups of coffee balanced inside a cardboard tray and rainwater still clinging to the sleeves of her coat. Spokane looked washed pale beneath another low gray sky, while delivery trucks moved through the industrial district with their headlights still on. Rowan was replacing wiring above the office door when she walked in. "You allergic to sleep?" she asked. "No, you sure?" Rowan tightened the last wire nut without answering. Below him, Mako watched Eden cross the garage floor before lowering his head back onto his paws beside the workbench heater. That surprised Rowan more than he expected. Most dogs didn't relax around strangers that quickly, military dogs especially. Eden set one of the coffees beside an open toolbox. "You don't have to pay me today," she said. "I'm still proving I'm useful. I never hired you." "Yeah," she said quietly. "I noticed." The old fluorescent light above the main bay flickered twice before steadying again. Somewhere outside, rain rattled softly against the loose metal gutters. Rowan still hadn't repaired. Eden stayed anyway. By noon, she had organized 3 months of unpaid invoices stacked beneath transmission parts near the office wall. She found registration paperwork Rowan thought he had lost, and cleaned enough dust off the front counter for the original wood grain to show again beneath the grease stains. She moved through the garage carefully, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping animal. Around 2 that afternoon, the shop phone rang while Rowan was underneath a rusted Dodge pickup replacing brake lines. He ignored it automatically. Eden didn't. "Vale Automotive," she answered before catching herself. Silence followed. Then, "Sorry. Wrong habit." Rowan slid himself halfway out from beneath the truck. "What did you say?" "Nothing," but it stayed with him. Over the next few days, the garage began changing, in ways Rowan noticed only because he had spent so long inside silence before she arrived. Coffee appeared before sunrise beside the compressor switch. The office trash actually got emptied. A small radio near the shelves drifted through old Alan Jackson songs low enough to blend with the sound of tools and steady rain against the roof. The place no longer felt abandoned after dark. That unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. Thursday morning brought freezing rain strong enough to blur the rail yard beyond the warehouses. Rowan stood near the bay entrance, replacing sheet metal along the roof edge, while Eden worked inside, sorting old machine parts into labeled bins. Without looking up, she said, "The breaker near the rear office trips if the compressor and heater run together." Rowan paused. "How do you know that?" Eden froze for barely a second before continuing to sort bolts into containers. Lucky guess, but it wasn't. Later that afternoon, she reached automatically beneath the front counter and smacked the exact spot needed to unstick the jammed cash drawer. Another time she crossed the garage without hesitation and grabbed a flashlight hidden inside an old red cabinet behind the hydraulic lift. Rowan himself had only discovered it 2 days earlier. The garages knew her, or maybe she knew the garage. Near closing time Friday evening, Rowan found her standing silently beside the faded sign near the office hallway. Her fingers rested lightly against scratches carved into the wall beside the doorway, old height marks drawn in black marker years earlier. 5'2", 5'6", 5'8", small dates written beside each line. She pulled her hand away when she realized Rowan had seen them. "You got family around here?" he asked. Eden shook her head once. Not anymore. Rainwater slid slowly down the front windows while a freight train groaned somewhere beyond the industrial park. The sound lingered through the walls like distant thunder. That night, Rowan stayed late rebuilding the carburetor from an old Camaro while Eden worked through receipts at the desk behind him. The garage smelled like gasoline, warm metal, and burnt coffee from the pot that had been sitting on too long. At 10:47 p.m., Rowan finally set his tools down. "You've done this before." Eden kept writing for several seconds before answering. "A little, that's not what I meant." The office heater clicked softly in the silence between them. Rowan leaned back against the workbench. "You know where everything is in this building," he said. "You knew the breaker box. You knew the stuck drawer. You knew where the flashlight was before I did." Eden stared down at the paperwork in front of her. Then she nodded once. "My father owned this garage." The rain outside seemed louder after that. Rowan didn't speak immediately. Neither did she. Finally, he asked, "Walter Vale?" Eden looked up, surprised. "You knew him?" "No." Rowan wiped grease from his hands with an old rag. Saw the name on the sign. For a moment, she almost smiled. "Yeah," she said softly. "That sounds like him." She told the story slowly after that, stopping often like someone walking through rooms she hadn't entered in a long time. Walter Vale had repaired trucks and farm equipment in that garage for nearly 30 years. Her mother died when Eden was 19. After that, it became just the two of them, though Walter spent more time under engines than talking about anything real. 6 months earlier, he collapsed beneath a pickup while replacing a transmission line. Stroke, 3 days in intensive care, then hospice. Hospital bills arrived before the funeral flowers died. Eden sold the garage to Valor Bridge 2 months later because there wasn't anything else left to sell. She explained all of it calmly, almost mechanically, while staring at the rain sliding down the windows behind Rowan. No tears. That somehow made the loneliness inside the story feel heavier. Mako stood and crossed the garage slowly while she talked. The German Shepherd stopped beside Eden's chair, nose lifting slightly toward the worn leather keychain hanging from her bag. Old oil, machine grease, faint traces of motor cleaner. Walter's scent still lived there. The dog pressed his nose once against the leather strap before turning away. A few minutes later, Rowan noticed Mako standing near the old repair pit beneath the center bay. The dog stared down at the concrete floor without moving. "Hey," Rowan called softly. Mako didn't respond. The German Shepherd remained fixed beside the pit while rain hammered the roof overhead and freight trains rolled through the darkness beyond Spokane's industrial district, like he was waiting for something beneath the floor to answer back. Rain hammered Spokane for almost 3 straight days during the middle of March. Water pooled along the broken pavement outside the garage and leaked steadily through weak spots. Rowan still hadn't reached on the roof. By Wednesday afternoon, runoff had started creeping beneath the main bay door in thin gray streams cold enough to numb his hands. The garage smelled like wet concrete and burned wiring. Rowan knelt beside the old repair pit with a pry bar while water collected near the drain beneath the center bay. Mako paced nearby, restless in a way Rowan hadn't seen since the dog's first months out of military service. "You're wearing grooves in the floor," Rowan muttered. The German Shepherd ignored him. Rain rattled violently against the roof overhead, while Eden dragged old towels toward the flooding water near the office hallway. Her sleeves were rolled past her elbows, streaked with grease and dust from spending most of the morning reorganizing storage shelves along the back wall. The garage no longer looked abandoned. It looked tired. There was a difference. Mako suddenly stopped near the old shelving unit beside the repair pit. His ears lifted sharply forward before he lowered his nose toward the concrete floor and began scratching hard against the edge of a steel plate buried beneath years of grime. Rowan looked over immediately. "What is it?" The dog scratched again. Metal echoed beneath the concrete. Eden stepped closer, breathing slightly harder from carrying soaked towels across the garage. "There's something under there." Rowan shoved the shelving unit aside inch by inch until rusted bolts scraped across the floor. Beneath it sat a narrow steel panel nearly invisible beneath layers of old paint and oil residue. The edges had been sealed intentionally. He crouched beside it. "Help me with the flashlight." 5 minutes later, Rowan forced the panel open with the pry bar, while rainwater dripped steadily from the ceiling onto his shoulders. A cold pocket of stale air escaped from beneath the floor, along with the smell of welding blankets and old machine oil trapped underground for years. Inside the compartment sat a weatherproof tool chest wrapped tightly in faded blue welding cloth. No cash, no hidden gold coins, nothing dramatic, just weight. Rowan lifted the chest onto the concrete floor while Mako sat beside him perfectly still, eyes fixed on the box like he already knew it mattered. The lock had rusted badly enough that Rowan snapped it open, using a hammer and flathead screwdriver. Eden stood across from him beneath the flickering bay light while water hissed across the pavement outside the garage. Inside the chest were stacks of folders tied with rubber bands, several flash drives sealed in plastic bags, handwritten journals, inspection notices, property maps, and a bundle of unopened letters held together with faded blue tape. Eden stared down at them silently. "That's his handwriting," she whispered. Rowan opened the first journal carefully. Most of the pages looked ordinary at first. Repair notes, part orders, fuel receipts, customer balances written in blue ink. Then the entries changed. Inspection visits started appearing repeatedly beside certain dates, environmental compliance warnings, property reassessments, permit reviews. One page contained 3 names written over and over again beneath a phone number for Valor Bridge Housing Initiative. Another included handwritten notes beside zoning maps marked with circles and arrows. They sat beside the tool chest for almost an hour while rain battered the garage roof overhead. The deeper Rowan read, the quieter he became. Walter Vale had refused multiple offers to sell the garage during the previous year. After every refusal, another problem appeared. Code inspections, drainage violations, environmental concerns, property access disputes. One entry stopped Rowan completely. March 4th. "They keep telling me this place is already dead." Nothing about the sentence felt dramatic. That made it worse. Eden folded her arms tightly across her chest while staring toward the old office window. "He never talked to me about any of this." Rowan flipped through more paperwork beneath the work light. Several land valuation reports listed surrounding properties at suspiciously low estimates compared to nearby commercial sales. Some signatures on redevelopment filings didn't match others attached to the same permit requests. A few environmental reports looked partially rewritten, not forged badly, adjusted carefully, like someone expected nobody to look too closely. Outside, a white utility truck rolled slowly past the garage before disappearing down the block toward the rail yard. Mako stood immediately. The dog moved toward the bay entrance without barking, just watching. Rowan noticed the truck too. That evening the power shut off without warning at 8:26 p.m. The compressor died first. Then the overhead lights flickered once before darkness swallowed the garage entirely, except for rainwater reflecting dim orange streetlight through the front windows. Eden looked up from the desk. "You miss a payment?" "No." Rowan grabbed a flashlight from the workbench. The breaker outside had been pulled manually. He knew because the metal latch still swung slightly in the wind when he stepped into the rain. Thursday morning brought 2 city inspectors carrying clipboards and polite smiles. They walked through the garage slowly, photographing wiring, measuring drainage slope near the repair pit, and asking questions about occupancy permits Rowan had never heard mentioned before. Conrad Pike arrived an hour later. Dark overcoat, clean boots, calm voice. He stood beneath the repaired section of roof while rainwater dripped steadily behind him. "Just routine reviews," he said. "Redevelopment projects create a lot of temporary compliance procedures." Rowan leaned against the workbench without inviting him further inside. "Funny timing." Conrad smiled politely. "That's usually how timing works." His eyes moved briefly toward the folders stacked near the office desk before returning to Rowan again. Then he left. The rain continued all afternoon. That night, Eden fell asleep in the office chair sometime after midnight, while sorting inspection documents into piles across the desk. Mako slept near the heater, though one ear remained lifted toward the garage entrance even in sleep. Rowan sat alone beneath the work light reading Walter's journals again. One page listed names. Another listed permit dates. Several entries ended abruptly mid-sentence, like Walter had stopped writing after hearing someone arrive outside. At 1:38 a.m., Rowan finally picked up his phone. Seattle answered on the fourth ring. Graves. Rowan stared across the dark garage before speaking. You still doing fraud work? A pause. Depends who's asking. Navy SEAL with a leaking garage and paperwork that doesn't smell right. That got a small laugh. Haven't heard your voices in 3 years, Nolan Graves said. Guessing this isn't a social call. No rain tapped softly against the office windows. Rowan looked toward Eden, sleeping beneath the desk's lamp, and then toward Mako, lying near the heater. For the first time in years, something inside him no longer felt numb. Not anger, not revenge, purpose. Rain finally stopped near the end of March, but the cold stayed trapped inside the garage walls long after the clouds moved east toward Idaho. Morning smelled like wet concrete and motor oil, while pale sunlight slipped through cracks in the bay doors in thin gray lines across the floor. Rowan had been awake since 4:50 a.m. The coffee beside him had already gone cold. Nolan Graves called just after sunrise from Seattle, while freight trains rolled through the rail yard behind the industrial district. Rowan listened silently from the office doorway while Mako lay stretched across the concrete beside his boots. You were right, Nolan said. Valor Bridge isn't just building veteran housing. Rainwater dripped slowly from the roof outside. What are they building? Land leverage. Paper shuffled on the other end of the line. 3 shell contractors tied to the redevelopment project bought properties around the district using falsified environmental cleanup estimates. They drove values down first. Then came the inspections. Then the buyouts. Rowan looked across the garage toward Eden, sorting invoices beneath the flickering work light. And Walter? A pause. Not the only owner pressured into selling, Nolan said quietly. Just the last one who kept refusing. The line stayed silent a few seconds after that, except for static and distant traffic somewhere outside Nolan's office. You still want in? Nolan finally asked. Rowan watched Mako lift his head toward Eden as she crossed the garage carrying fresh coffee. She said, I'm in. Business slowed almost immediately after the inspection visits started. A plumbing company from Airway Heights canceled 2 repair jobs without explanation. A delivery contractor Rowan had worked on 3 times suddenly stopped answering calls. Even walk-in customers became rare once rumors spread that the garage might lose its occupancy permits before summer. Bills stacked across the office desk faster than repair orders. Power, water, parts invoices, insurance notices. Sam sat alone after closing, staring at numbers beneath the weak desk lamp while freight trains shook the windows behind him. The garage no longer felt dead. It felt cornered. One Thursday afternoon, a black Dodge Ram from Tacoma rolled slowly into the lot carrying a collector named Martin Keene, mid-60s. Expensive watch. Expensive boots, the kind of man who smelled faintly like cigars and leather seats even in cold weather. He walked slowly around the project cars Rowan had been restoring in the rear bay. Shame about this place, Keene said. You've got talent. Rowan kept sanding rust from an old Mustang door panel. Keene smiled slightly. I could buy everything here today, he said. Cars, tools, parts. Enough cash for you to relocate somewhere clean before this district collapses. Eden looked up from the front counter but stayed quiet. Keene pulled a folded business card from his coat pocket and placed it beside Rowan's toolbox. You shouldn't drown with a building already marked for demolition. Then he left. The garage stayed quiet after the truck disappeared down the block. Only the sound of sandpaper moving slowly across metal remained. That night, Eden stood near the coffee machine, rinsing grease from her hands while Rowan studied the business card beneath the office light. You could take it, she said softly. Rowan didn't answer. You don't owe this place anything. The heater rattled behind them. Eden dried her hands on an old shop towel before continuing. My father did, she said. Look where that got him. Rowan finally looked up. Rainwater slid down the office windows behind her in long silver streaks. You want me to leave? No. She shook her head once. I'm saying I'd understand if you did. Mako crossed the room quietly and lowered himself onto the concrete between them. Neither spoke again for a while. The next few days passed in pieces. patching another roof leak above the rear bay, eating takeout burgers after midnight beside open toolboxes, falling asleep over permit documents, waking to train horns and cold mornings. The garage had started sounding human again. That frightened Rowan more than he expected. Sunday night arrived hard and windy. Freight cars slammed together in the rail yard at exactly 2:13 a.m. with a violent metallic crash that echoed through the industrial district like an explosion trapped inside steel. Rowan woke instantly. For one terrible second, the garage vanished. Heat, dust, burning diesel, radio static screaming through gunfire. His breathing collapsed into short, violent bursts while he hit the concrete floor beside the cot hard enough to shake the office desk. Mako moved before Rowan fully understood where he was, pressing his weight against Rowan's chest and shoulder with trained force until the panic stopped spiraling. The dog stayed there, steady, heavy, real. A few seconds later, Eden appeared in the office doorway, wearing an oversized sweatshirt and holding the edge of the frame with one hand. She looked at Rowan once, then at Mako, then quietly sat down on the concrete beside them without asking questions Rowan didn't want to answer. Outside, another freight train groaned through the darkness. Inside, nobody spoke. Rowan stared at the floor while his breathing slowly steadied beneath the sound of the heater clicking behind them. Eden sat close enough to stay present but far enough not to trap him. Mako never moved his head from Rowan's chest. The moment passed slowly, like weather. A week later, Nolan sent copies of Walter's documents to an investigative reporter in Olympia specializing in redevelopment fraud tied to state contracts. 2 days after that, local news stations started asking questions about Valor Bridge's environmental filings and permit approvals. Public hearings followed, then audits, then lawyers. Conrad Pike stopped smiling during inspection visits after that. One rainy afternoon, he stood near the front entrance watching reporters gather across the street beside city vehicles. "This doesn't end well for places like this," he said quietly. Rowan wiped grease from his hands with a rag. "Maybe." Conrad looked around the garage one last time. "At some point," he said, "you have to let dead places go." Behind Rowan, Eden stood near the workbench beneath the faded Vale Automotive sign while Mako rested beside her boots. Rain tapped softly against the roof. Rowan looked back at Conrad. "Maybe people said the same thing about you once." Conrad didn't answer. He simply turned and walked back into the rain while train horns echoed low across Spokane Valley beyond the rail yard. By the first week of April, people around Spokane Valley had stopped calling the redevelopment project inevitable. Now they called it under review. Local stations ran stories about falsified environmental reports tied to Valor Bridge Housing Initiative, while state auditors moved through city offices carrying cardboard archive boxes and portable scanners. Public hearings stretched late into the evenings inside municipal buildings downtown, where exhausted clerks drank burnt coffee beneath fluorescent lights and lawyers avoided reporters outside revolving glass doors. No dramatic arrests happened. No federal agents stormed through the district. The project simply began collapsing beneath the weight of its own paperwork. Conrad Pike resigned 3 days before the state formally expanded the financial investigation. His statement appeared online sometime after midnight, carefully written, professionally distant, full of phrases like cooperation, administrative transition, and temporary leave of absence. Rowan read it once on his phone while standing beside the compressor, then went back to work. Rain drifted through Spokane off and on for most of April. The garage roof still leaked near the rear bay, despite 3 separate patch jobs, and the heater inside the office made a grinding sound every time it switched on. Some weeks they barely earned enough to cover electricity and parts orders. But customers started returning. A roofing contractor from Cheney brought in 2 work trucks with transmission problems. The drywall installer from Deer Park came back with his brother's Silverado. An older woman from Liberty Lake dropped off a faded blue Buick and left homemade banana bread beside the register because Rowan refused to charge her for labor twice. Word traveled quietly. The garage fixed things honestly. That mattered more than flashy signs. One afternoon, Eden stood beside the office desk sorting legal paperwork while sunlight filtered weakly through the front windows. Her hair was tied loosely back with a pencil, and grease stains marked both sleeves of her sweatshirt from helping Rowan replace an alternator earlier that morning. She slid one document across the desk toward him. "Read the last page." Rowan wiped his hands on a rag before taking it. The legal language stretched across almost 4 pages: temporary injunctions, property reassessments, civil review hearings. Then came the section that mattered. Conditional ownership rights connected to the original Vale Automotive property would partially revert to Eden Vale, pending final state review and redevelopment suspension agreements. Rowan read it twice. "You got the garage back." Eden looked down at the paperwork instead of smiling. "Part of it. That's still something." Outside, a freight train horn rolled low through the rail yard behind the warehouses. Rain tapped softly against the front windows again. Eden folded her arms across her chest. "My father would have hated all of this." Rowan looked up. The lawyers? The attention. That almost made him laugh. Almost. Several days later, Martin Keene called again from Tacoma asking whether Rowan had reconsidered selling the project cars. Rowan stood near the open bay door while cold evening wind pushed rain across the lot in thin silver sheets. "No," he said. "You sure?" Rowan looked back inside the garage. Eden sat on the floor beside the hydraulic lift sorting socket wrenches into trays, while Mako slept nearby beneath the workbench heater. Old Alan Jackson songs drifted softly from the radio near the shelves, low enough to blend with the sound of rain against the roof. For the first time in years, the building no longer felt temporary. "Yeah," Rowan answered quietly. "I'm sure." The final city hearing happened on a Tuesday afternoon beneath clear skies for the first time in weeks. Reporters gathered outside the municipal building, while contractors and property owners crowded the hallways, carrying folders thick with unpaid invoices and legal statements. Rowan attended because Nolan told him he should. Eden almost didn't. Conrad Pike never looked directly at either of them during the proceedings. He sat near the far end of the room beside 2 attorneys while state investigators discussed permit irregularities and redevelopment filings tied to manipulated land values throughout the industrial district. Walter Vale's name appeared more than once. So did several others. Men who sold because they were tired. Men who sold because they got scared. Men who ran out of money before the pressure stopped. By sunset, the city officially suspended demolition approvals tied to the district pending extended review. The hearing ended quietly after that. People simply stood up and went home. Late that same evening, Rowan climbed a ladder beneath the faded Vale Automotive sign while cold rain drifted through the empty street outside the garage. Eden stood below holding the flashlight while Mako slept beside the office heater with his paws twitching softly in dreams. The sign looked older up close. Rust had eaten through sections of the metal frame, and several bulbs had burned black years earlier beneath cracked glass covers. Rowan tightened the final wiring connection while Eden painted over faded lettering using the same dark blue Walter originally chose decades ago. "You missed a spot," Rowan said. Eden glanced upward. "Where?" "Bottom of the V." She narrowed her eyes toward the sign. "You're making that up, maybe." That earned the smallest smile he had seen from her in days. At 8:42 p.m., Rowan climbed down from the ladder and crossed the wet garage floor toward the breaker box near the office wall. Rain hissed softly against the pavement outside, while freight trains rolled through the darkness beyond Spokane's rail yard. Eden stepped beside him without speaking. Mako lifted his head. Rowan pushed the breaker upward. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the sign flickered once, twice. Finally, warm yellow light spread across the wet pavement outside the garage, reflecting softly through the rain beneath the words. Vale Automotive and Machinanabadi spoke for a while after that. The heater rattled quietly behind them while another freight train moved slowly through the dark beyond the warehouses. Rowan stood beside Eden with grease still on his hands and rainwater dripping from the sleeves of his jacket. Mako settled heavily against his boots again like he had hundreds of nights before. But something had changed. For the first time since Syria, Rowan no longer felt like a man waiting for his life to end. Sometimes I think the loneliest people in America are not the ones standing on street corners or sleeping beneath bridges. Sometimes it's the people quietly fixing things nobody else believes are worth saving anymore. An old garage, a tired dog, a broken routine, a life that stopped moving forward years ago. What stayed with me most about Rowan wasn't the investigation or the corruption or even the fight to keep the garage alive. It was the smaller things. The way he kept showing up every morning even when business was failing. The way Eden carried grief without turning it into bitterness. The way Mako never stopped watching over the people he loved, even after the war was over. I think a lot of us know what it feels like to keep going while carrying things we never fully talk about. And maybe healing doesn't always arrive like a miracle. Maybe sometimes it comes slowly through ordinary evenings, shared silence, rain against old windows, or one small light turning back on after being dark for a very long time. If this story meant something to you, I'd truly love to hear where you're listening from and what part stayed in your heart the longest. Feel free to share your own experiences, memories of someone you miss, or even a prayer for another person reading these comments tonight. And if you enjoy stories about resilience, quiet courage, second chances, and the bond between people and loyal dogs, don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep sharing them together. Take care of yourselves out there, and take care of each other.